It was a couple years ago. I I must have been having a really bad day. If I was to be honest, I was probably having a bad period in my life. It was before I was running. I know that. I say 2 years. It might have been a year and a half ago. Physically, I wasn't in the shape that I had been in before. Mentally, I wasn't there. Spiritually, I probably wasn't there. And I'm across town and I'm calling Walgreens to get some medication that I'm needing, and they say, "Yeah, come get it." So I drive 30 minutes over there. The problem here was it took 30 plus minutes to get a hold of them. They kept putting me on. I don't know what their system was doing, but it was very frustrating, and it wasn't the first time either. So it was very frustrating. So I got a hold of the girl. She said, "Yep, come on, come get it." So I drive 30 minutes because it's not where it's where I used to live, from where I was, and I drove there. And I go through the drive-through. I'm waiting. I'm waiting about 10 minutes because those lines can be long. So I get to the front, get to my turn, roll my window down. I said, give them my last name, tell them what it is, and they don't have the medication that I'm supposed to have. What it was it was the wrong brand, and so they said it's going to be $450. And I said, look, we've been through this before. Uh, you have to talk to my provider, and they'll sort this out. And they said we can't do it. And I said, well, I understand. I've been here before, and I know you have done it, so you should be able to do it again. And she said, "Sir, I just can't do it." And I was like, "Do you have someone else I can speak to there?" So another person comes, maybe it's a manager, and she says the same thing. And I know that they can do it, so I'm getting frustrated at this point, which really bothers me because I don't do this. I don't ever do this, and I can feel my blood pressure rising, and I'm getting more frustrated. And I said, "Look, I need to speak to your boss." And I'm like, "Oh, I can feel it in my soul already. The little voice, you don't do this, Ewan. Why are you doing this?" So hit the main guy, the head of the branch comes and he said, "Sir, I'll try and call." And I said, "Look, I'm not moving out of this spot until you get it fixed." Which I don't do this.
You don't.
And the line's building up behind me, and they said, "Sir, well, we'll have to call the police if you don't move." And I said, "You go ahead and call them." And I knew immediately right there, I'm calling their bluff. I know I'm not going to let the police come.
Yeah.
And not even talking about it now. I just was telling you, this is very difficult for me to say because this is me completely out of control, completely falling apart. And I never do this. Like, I pride myself on like keeping it together in difficult situations. So I was just I analyzed the whole thing. Um, so I drive, I say, all right, I can't believe this. Like, you guys, from the phone calls, from how you're handling this now, this is the worst experience. I don't understand how you guys are acting like this and not being able to provide what it is that I know I'm in the right for. And they said, we're sorry, sir. And so I just drive off angrily. And so I'm about 20 minutes away, and I call my provider. I'm like, look, this is what happened. They're like, yeah, that shouldn't be happening. So they make a call. And so I'm about 20 miles in, and I'm just feeling kind of justified. Like, I know I'm right. But I'm 20 minutes away, and I just kind of dressed this manager guy down, and he was kind of a nice guy. And I thought to myself, what have I done? I can't believe I've acted like this. And so I turn around and I'm like, this is going to be so embarrassing, but I have to apologize. I have to make this right.
Mm.
So I drive all the way back, and I thought about turning around for about 5 minutes straight too. I was like, it's going to be too embarrassing. It's going to be super awkward. This is going to be so bad. There was like three people staring at me through the window. And so I was like, but I've got to. I will not be able to sleep tonight if I don't do it. So I drive back 20 minutes to the Walgreens, and I go into the store, and I start walking to the guy. He's behind the desk, and he sees me coming, and he looks like a deer in headlights. His face went white because I'm coming in. He's thinking I'm aggressive, like this angry guy. And I went up to him and I said, "Sir, you handled yourself very professionally. I can't believe that I did that, and I just want to apologize to you for the way I acted." And he was like shocked. He was like, "Well, man, I really appreciate it." And he said, "I understand that happens." I said, "No, you don't understand. This doesn't happen to me." And so I said, "I just want to ask for forgiveness." And man, we shook hands and we talked for a little bit, and ended up being a great situation. And I said to the girls, the staff, I was like, "Look, super sorry, but I know in the past I probably would have just let that. Maybe let's say 10 years ago, I probably would have just been justified and angry. Went to
Mm.
sleep that night and being like, I can't believe they did this. But I've learned through life that I don't sleep good at night if I don't keep myself in integrity and act in a way that I know is good. Because if I act that way to them, how will they act towards other people in their lives, right? It's the pass it on effect. So I turned around, and it just made me think it's so important to be able to drop pride, ego, and right wrongs as fast as possible. Right, what I did, those things will always happen. I'll probably do it again at some point in my life. I'd have to assume that I would. I pray that I won't. But everybody does what I did at some point, right? And they will continue to do it. The key is how do you handle it? How do you bounce back when you've embarrassed yourself, when you've acted, even if I was in the right, but it does not give me the right to uh, act or treat people that way.
Yeah.
So that's my shameful experience and story. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about bouncing back from difficult, embarrassing situations so that you can level up. This is a massive level up skill. Builds great respect from people when you're able to do this, and it buys you a lot of love, and it also opens the door for other people to be vulnerable and to be the same way back to you if you lead in that way. So, can you resonate, Sean? You got a story
Yeah.
similar?
Yeah, man. What I'm hearing you say in your beautiful story that you just shared is step one was you owned it. You took the power of accountability. You
Yeah,
admitted your mistake and you took that, which to me, in my experience, that's taking that first step of bouncing back, is acknowledging that you acted inappropriately. And then you took ownership in it. And then you went to step two, which is an apology within, with intention, and not just I'm sorry, to get it off your chest. You were actually genuinely and intentional. And then for you, you went above and beyond by going 20 minutes back out of your way to go back, when whether they made the mistake or not, you actually apologized and how you showed up. And then what I heard out of your story is you reflected and you learned from that acting inappropriately. And so, like you said in the story, is you analyzed it. And I'm curious, I'm going to kind of dovetail off of this. When you reflected and learned, for the listeners and anybody listening to this, when you go back to that moment you were in the drive-through, when you analyzed how you showed up and how you acted, could you put a pulse on why you acted and showed up like that?
man. I kind of like I mentioned. I think the lack of exercise, which I know sounds ludicrous, when you're not physically getting active and moving your body around, your brain cannot function at full capacity. If you have stress, immense stress, and I really think I had a lot of stress going on in my life at the time, um, self-inflicted stress, let's say that, like because stress comes from thought process, and I wasn't thinking straight. And diet wasn't good, sleep wasn't good, not exercising, and then adding stress. It was just a catalyst for bad decisions and reacting sharply, and not being in control of the person that I've always tried to be. And so, yeah, I think it sounds very simple, but I think it was just the physical, like just the lack of awareness of where I was at that time
How could you have
physically.
done things differently?
Man, that's a brilliant question. All the things I've been doing since then, which is exercising, getting back to prayer time with God, analyzing my weekly actions, thinking about who I want to become and the things that I want to do, and who does that person need to be. So just being very aware, very present, and knowing that it's always possible. The life will always throw curveballs that it will allow you to get upset and angry. So if that's true, you have to expect that it will happen every day and be prepared. And I do. I think today, man, the worst will come at me, and I'll be prepared. And when it doesn't, man, it's just another great day. But I'm always prepared for that. In fact, I almost crave it because it's going to be a great example to whoever that what is possible, right? Like it's possible to not act in aggression or act in knee jerk response.
Yeah. Well, and on this point of reflecting and learning and what you've done, and I know you do a lot of ideation, a lot of analyzing yourself. Did you get any feedback from that moment? Did you talk to your spouse or a friend or a partner about how you reacted to get their feedback?
Yeah, I spoke to Kel, my wife, and I spoke to um, another lady that I know. She's kind of a counselor, and and both of them. It's interesting. Both of them, and they were. I'm sure they were being nice. Like said, hey, but you were in the right to be, because what they could have done, they ended up doing. They ended up doing what I said they could have done, and I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, I was right, but I didn't act right. And
Right.
they both agreed. Yeah, correct. You wouldn't want to respond in that way, but yeah, and they were very good at just listening to me, and letting me process that myself by letting it out. And I learned my lesson so fast. Like I learned it driving away. Um, like that this just cannot stand. And it was a pivotal moment, because since then it made me take stock of all that I had kind of what had led to me to be in that state, and then doing all the things that can get me away from that state going forward.
And what I'm hearing you say is growth through failure is a key ingredient. And
Mm.
what you just said, people need to rewind that, because to me, that's wisdom talking. Is you're learning from your failures. And my, if I'm being completely transparent, the instance, the scenario, the story that you just shared, there was instances where that would show up in my life with conversations in with my team members, my spouse, and I
Yes.
wouldn't learn from my mistakes. And I would continue to do that over and over and over, and wonder why I experienced frustration and overwhelm, because they weren't actively listening. Or in this situation with the story that you just shared, to me, one of the things that I gathered is all you as a human being is when people say, I can't do that, you're hearing can't.
Mm.
Well, I want somebody that's going to help, like, okay, you can't do this, but what can we do to kind of solve this problem together?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a number of variations that go into it. And so I was just closed off of, oh, you can't or you won't. And so instead of putting all my focus on the outcome of getting what it is that I want to get, then what happens within?
Yeah.
I act out. I'm frustrated. All these emotions, I start acting on these emotions. And that's not emotional intelligence. That's
Yeah.
not an emotional capacity. So I had to learn the hard way, like you did, is what's happening to those around me? How are the people through the drive through, my team members, my family, how are they feeling when they're around me?
Mm.
And so I finally learned over time that by growing through my failures in the way I communicated and understanding, like, hey, this is not appropriate, it allowed me to start communicating that, hey, these are my struggles. Listen, I'm struggling with this. I I'm this. You said you can't. That's a trigger word for me. I'm
Mm.
working on things right now. How can we solve this together?
It's a
So I'd
brilliant
actually
tip.
like work through it with them.
Yeah, I think
And
that you just gave a brilliant tip to people right there, saying, I
yeah,
don't do well with can't. Can you
yes,
help me? Because people love to help other folk, but if you just say, if they didn't know that you don't deal with can't, and you're just sitting there with can't, and that's what sets you off, man, they're
yep,
about to get a face full of just frustration and anger, because that's what is inside you, and there's no communication there. There's no open door. You feel trapped. And what happens with pressure? You're trapped, and the pressure just builds until it erupts. And it's also, if it's happened many times in the past before, we repeat patterns if we
mm,
don't take stock like you did. Like you took that stock and figured out, I can't keep acting like this. How are other people responding to me? I don't like the way they're responding. How
right.
can I look at myself? And that's brilliant what you said, telling them. And I haven't thought about that or used that myself. I need to think about what some of my maybe triggers with hearing, hey, I don't do well with can't.
Mm.
Can you help me out? That's really great advice. Anybody listening, that's brilliant.
Because what you're doing is you're communicating through growth. And this is another key point that I wanted to drive home here, is for me and human beings listening to this, we all struggle with how we communicate. None of us are perfect. We're imperfect, human beings. But in then communication, that's always been a big struggle of mine.
Mm.
And so, and we all receive how I say one thing, and somebody else may receive it in a different way. Just like this gentleman, he said he can't. Well, that might be normal for him, but for
Mm.
you, it's like can't. Like that's not in our vocabulary.
Yeah.
So communicating to your growth, hey, I'm struggling with something here, like you just said, that allows you to that allows you to not only share the vulnerability and be raw and authentic, but it like, let's work together and not against each other. Because then when you
Yeah.
start working against each other, that's where the disconnect is.
That's right.
So when you
Nothing
start
happens.
communicating through that growth, that
Yeah.
that for me, that allows, that demonstrates like, hey, I'm committed. Let's improve through the actions, and these are my
Mm.
actions. And
And
so,
it's so
yeah.
it's so powerful when you're saying that too. Like you could have that specific conversation that you're having, but it's not about that specific conversation. It is the overall impact you're having of the environment that you created
Mm.
with that. Right? It was an open space, and
Yep.
uh, everybody knows you could get super angry and frustrated. We all know that's very easy to do. It's not impressive to get angry and frustrated. But so when you create that space of I'm not going to do that, the other person, the impact they get is wow, look at what is possible. Maybe they have also been that way, but now they know a different way and they can learn. And that's leadership right there, right? Like you're opening a door for other people to act in the same way.
And so, I'll take this to another level. That was a one-on-one communication through growth, and that helps build the trust and the consistency, because that's how you're showing up and how and who you're wanting to become, personally or professionally, which reestablish that trust after the mistake that you made. But
Yeah.
obviously, the goal moving forward is to make it, to be proactive and know, oh, this is how I'm fixing to show up. I need to go ahead and address that, and you can
Yeah.
address that through your communication. Hey, I'm struggling here. You know, I'm not used to hearing I can't, and then that person automatically goes, okay, this guy's struggling. Let's get on the same team.
Yeah.
And
And he's much
so,
more likely to actually help you out.
exactly,
You know, because
100%.
he's like, we all know where that conversation's going. You know, we've all been
Yeah,
there before. He says, I need or I want. I say, I can't. He gets upset. Like, that's just how the world works. We all know it's
yeah,
heading there. But when you interrupt the pattern of, hey, I struggle with this. Can you help me out? They have
yep,
to, it's going to make them pause. They're not going to then knee jerk react because they can't. They have
yes.
to think clearly because this is not a path they've been down before. And then I have to respond. And maybe there's something there that they can do, which is a beautiful thing. You know, one thing I think is also important to mention is, and it's rare when you blow up at strangers, right? Because we're on our best behavior. We don't know these people. There's no past history. But you mentioned it with wives or employees. You know, when it comes to wives or partners, disrespectful communication is so easy with them because you can get away with it. They're stuck with you. What are they going to do, right? And we can get in those patterns and habits and emotional neglect, lack of accountability, and with kids, you know, we can be dismissive. Um, you know, employees, we can speak to them in micromanagement type ways, right? There's all these things where we know these people and they're not strangers, and we can use and abuse them. And I think they're the most important people where we have to really double down on how we communicate. And when we frustrate or make them stumble or make them angry or we've disrespected them, it's vital that we correct that immediately. And so, yeah, to me, it's a game of, oh, how did I just do that? Can I even catch myself in the middle of my sentence of me being a way I don't want to be and say, I'm sorry, I'm being this way right now. I think that's so huge. And again, like we mentioned, when you can do that, their guard goes completely down and then they open up and then the true communication comes out and it's a
Mm,
blissful state. So yeah, I
yes.
think I think it's important to remember, you know, family, friends is another one. It's more like we're on our best behavior with friends because we could lose a friend. When it's family, it's a different ball game because you're kind of stuck with them. You can kind of do what you want. They'll see the true version. You've been with them for 10 years, 15 years.
Yep.
You've had enough. You're frustrated, and they have given you, in your mind, a world of hurt. So I'm just going to hurt them back, right? Like
Mm.
these little nitpicky things. That's the most important ones I think that we got to catch. And when you can do it with them, it should very well be much easier out here in the real world with strangers. You know.
Yeah, moving forward, and then, what's the next step in that? And from my experience, it's moving forward with clear boundaries. Hey, look, this is the way I reacted. This is the way I acted. Moving forward, I know this is saying is one thing, but actions is actually how I'm wanting to show up. And so, for me, it's like setting those expectations for myself, and then prioritizing my emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence, man, and emotional capacity. I've been down the rabbit hole here in the last several months, just in leadership and understanding my when I'm tired, when I'm lonely, when I'm frustrated, because we all experience that as human beings. And for me, it's like recognizing that the emotional awareness, it plays a huge role in how I react and then avoiding inappropriate behavior in the future, because it's not if, but when. Here you are, a 30, 40-year-old man going through the drive-through, and it's a simple little issue, right, to society. But for you, it's like, no, this is the end of the world. This is the way it's making it seem. And
Mm.
so it's like, okay, I'm going to analyze this. I'm going to manage my reactions moving forward, because it's not if, but is this going to show up again? Because it might when you least expect it, because it may be a blind spot. It may be because whether you were stressed or tired or all these different variations. And so for me, it's like moving forward with clear boundaries. Whether I jump on a phone call or a podcast or go through a drive-through at CVS, or I'm fixing to walk into meet another leader and do lunch or coffee. I may be sick that morning or tired that morning, or maybe I just got cut off on traffic.
Mm.
So moving forward, I'm going to have a clear boundary and set a clear expectation for myself and reflect on what has happened in the past, because I know I don't want to be that guy. Here's who I need to be moving forward, and I'm going to prioritize that emotional intelligence moving forward, because to me, that's emotional capacity, that's emotional intelligence into the scenario, the story, the situation that you're about to go in, and that's how you see continuous improvement.
Agreed, man. And it's some key indicators for me on that, like some low hanging fruit. Yelling is never appropriate. You never yell at another human being unless you're trying to like protect someone, right?
Yeah.
Like there's physical altercations, but there's no need to ever yell, because all you're communicating is loudness and aggression. They're not hearing the words you're saying to me. And disrespectful language, name calling, that is 101 of things that you can prevent, like starting your process of being able to bounce back. If you can handle those, there's no bouncing. You don't need to bounce back when you can get yelling and name calling. Public criticism, that's another one. I think if you can prevent that, that's going to solve a lot of other knock-on effect issues, because then there's a much bigger problem you'd have to deal with after the fact. So, and those are all things I've dealt with myself. Like I've done those things in the past, and when I was in my younger years, and my parents were good examples. And even then, I had to learn my own lessons. But because I know anyone else than me, I'm not hearing what they're saying. I'm going to perk up, right? And knowing what I know now, if someone yells at me, I know now, hey, it's time to calm this thing down. Like, don't raise your voice back, right? Someone yells at you, someone is aggressive with you, ask questions, don't knee jerk respond back. Like, hey, you sound like you're upset. What's going on? And
Mm.
then they tell you, and you say, hey, I hear what you're saying. What's really going on?
Yeah.
Because then you're going to get to the bottom of what is actually bothering them. Because normally what they're saying is not what they're upset about. I'm thinking about the Walgreens people. Like, this is just hit me now. If he had said, "So you sound really upset," and is there is there anything else actually going on? I probably would have been like, if I was in my rational state, I'd be like, you know what? Yes, I'm very stressed out right now, or I would think, you know what? I've not been eating good. I didn't sleep well, and that's probably what's showing up for me right now. So I apologize. As
Yeah.
opposed to, those are just little tidbits. So it's to think about. But when I think of those, I really think about like a husband and wife, or parent to kid. It's really important to do those low hanging fruits. No yelling, no name calling, and no public criticism. If you remove those three, man, life will get infinitely better immediately with your communication and trust, because they can trust you that you won't do those things. And when you have trust, man, guards and barriers come down.
So this leads me into, with everything that we've talked about in the last 20 plus minutes, is sharing and inspiring others. So that story that you just shared, Ewan, and you opening up and the vulnerability that you've created by sharing your story is, to me, from my experience, is a leadership strength. So to our listeners and audience that are listening to this, where can you share your story? Where can you share where you had a knee jerk reaction, because we all have, and share it with other individuals and apply some of these in your own life. And so for me, it's paying it forward. And this, by sharing it, which is not only caring, but it's, for me, it's also a recovery process. I think that's why I'm so vulnerable and authentic, because in my hope that it inspires the people around us, and we can create a culture of openness and learning. Here recently, I took another leader. I asked another leader to go to coffee with me, and he said yes. And I hadn't talked to this guy in probably a decade. I was super excited about meeting up with him at the coffee shop, and from a distance, he to society, he looked and played the par with the looks and the success, and I remember him reaching out to me 10 years ago, kind of the alternative role, going, "Hey, what has catapulted you into where you are today?" And this was 10 years ago, and so I wanted to reach out to him because I've been just building relationships and network, and immediately my intention going into this meeting was, I'm going to drop the ego, drop the pride. I'm going to get super raw. I'm going to get super vulnerable, and I'm going to be authentic, because this is who I'm becoming. This is how I want to show up. It would have been very easily for us to both come in with ego and pride of what we've done the last 10 years. But I know that's not going to get me to where I want to go. And so I went immediately into the conversation of, hey, I'm super vulnerable. This is what it's happened. This is what my story has looked like in the last 3 years. It ain't all been rainbows and sunshines. It's been dark. It's been a struggle. I've had to put a lot of work. And his eyes were just like a deer in the headlights by taking a step back. Why am I sharing this? Is because the story that you just opened up with, and you said it behind the episode in the podcast, it took guts and courage for leaders and people listening to this that are wanting to be 1% better every single day. How do you grow? How do you get these clear boundaries? How do you continue to reflect? It's by sharing and getting it out open, getting it out there, whether it's publicly like we do on podcast, or whether it's privately. But start somewhere, because that's what's going to not only inspire the people around you and help continue to maybe guide you and share in different blind spots. But when you share, just like you did on this story, there's a new profound feeling like, oh, I got this out there. I'm just a human being. And by being vulnerable, to me, that's a strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, man. It's a bad look to share bad stories, and you know that too, because you've shared your story so many times. It doesn't look good to say how these struggles, when we're trying to look like we have it all together, but that's a mask, right? Because that wouldn't be truth, because we're not
Right.
actually sharing what has actually happened, and we're just showing this social media version, right? Which isn't real. But by sharing the truth and allowing that bad look, and knowing you're bigger than the bad look, right? Like, I'm not worried about the looking bad, compared to the impact that it will have to help other people. And I know you feel the same way. So that there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. It's okay to look bad, because everybody does. So that's the cosmic joke. Everybody looks bad. We're all just trying to hide it. So why hide it? Let it out, and we can all be authentic. And that's a beautiful place to be. That's a level up world.
Yes. It's the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset.
Yes.
I've been the fixed mindset guy. The fixed mindset guy is just going about his day, not being intentional about his reactions, his emotions, his thoughts, his ideas. That's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset is, how am I showing up on this podcast, in this video? How is my facial expressions? How's my body language right now? How am I going through this drive-through? Am I tired? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I frustrated? That's an acronym that I've heard, that I've written down in a journal. HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Oh, I
HALT.
like that. That's good.
HALT. And we're one of those four things. And it can be in the afternoon times. And you, by being self-aware, this will tie back into and allow you to not only become who you want to be, but it'll tie into that long-term growth mindset. And it'll also help you build that reputation. And final takeaway, mistakes don't define you. Your response does. So that's my final take for the day.
Yeah. If you resonate with any of this, if you struggle, and you don't have anyone to talk to, reach out to us. We'd love to chat. We'll be vulnerable. We'll be open. Love to hear from you. If you have questions or anything to add, bring it on. We'd love to connect. And any way we can help, level you up. And believe us, you will be helping us level up too. So it's a give and take. It's mutual. So
Links in the show notes to contact us and our contact information. So outside of that, level up and live.
Level up and live.